Hey guys, in this video I'm going to be talking about the quadratics taking square roots strategy assignment on Khan Academy. Basically, in this assignment, you're looking at the steps that it takes to solve the quadratics. So if you look at this one from here to here, what they did is they subtracted 6 from both sides, which is what you would need to do first, right? You're going to try to get your first goal is to get the squared thing by itself, right? So I want to get the x minus 3 squared by itself first. So we're going to subtract 6 from both sides, and then they have a blank here, and I want to know what would go in the blank. The easiest way to do this would probably to think, okay, what step do I need to do next? Which would be to divide by 2. So if I divide both sides by 2, that is not even remotely a 2. There we go. I'm going to get x minus 3 squared equals 4. And then if I want to think about, okay, then does that make sense with the next step? How would they get from here to here? Hopefully we can see that to get from here to here, you just need to take the square root of both sides, right? If I take the square root of this side, I'm just going to get rid of that squared. So I'm going to have x minus 3 left. And the square root of 4 is 2, specifically plus or minus 2, right? And then to get from here to here, just for the sake of thoroughness, I would split this into the two cases. So I'd have x minus 3 equals 2 and x minus 3 equals negative 2. And then I would add 3 to both sides. So I get x equals 5 and adding 3 to both sides, I would get x equals 1. So my answers would be 1 and 5. But for the sake of the question, we're looking for what goes here. And we think that it is x minus 3 squared equals 4. That would make sense. I needed to divide both sides by 2 so that I could get rid of that square root. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that one. Note that this one doesn't make sense because if I divide by 2, they subtracted 2 instead of dividing by 2, but this is being multiplied, so we need to divide. So the 6 doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. Either you can't distribute a squared when you have addition or subtraction in between, only if you had multiplication or division. So I can't distribute this squared, so this one doesn't make any sense. And also because then what happens to the 2? And in this one, they've just lost the squared. So that's not right either. So let's go ahead and check. And it was correct, so that's good. So I'm going to look at the next question. So this question is, instead of what's the missing step, this is a find the error question. So we're looking at what did they do wrong. So here they divided by 5, which is fine. But then here, right, they took the square root of both sides, but they forgot the plus or minus. Okay, so remember, these always have 2 answers. And so if you're not getting that second answer, then something something went wrong. So it's here. The mistake is there should be a plus or minus right here. Let's see. Okay, and then we're back to what should step 1 have been? What would go here, right? If you're solving this, what's the equation that would go here? All right, so let's go ahead and look at the next one. So this one, we're ordering the steps, right? What do I need to do first, second, third, fourth? So here I already have the squared thing by itself. So the first thing I need to do is I need to take the square root of both sides. So I need to take the square root of both sides. No, that's different thing from squaring both sides, right? Squaring both sides would be, this would become x minus 5 to the fourth, and this would become 25 squared. That's not what I want, right? I want the opposite of that. So it's not squaring both sides, it's taking the square root of both sides. Once you've done that, you would have, my pen, you would have x minus 5 equals plus or minus 5, right? So what would you need to do next would be to add 5 to both sides. You would split it into the two cases first before you do that, but that's not one of the options. So we're, guess not, we're just not putting that step. And then we would be done. There's no reason to ever square both sides in an equation like this. And we don't have a reason to multiply both sides by 5. So these are just extra things to kind of confuse you, I guess. So the options that we needed were taking the square root of both sides and then adding 5 to both sides. And then this one's going to have a lot more steps, right? Because we have to get the x plus 5 squared by itself first before we can do anything else. So the first thing is always going to be to get rid of what's being added or subtracted. It's being added, so we need to subtract. So it gives you add, multiply, or subtract. So you need to know that you need to subtract that because it's being added. And the next thing you want to do is get rid of this. So we need to multiply by the reciprocal. So you could think of it as dividing by a half, but dividing by a fraction is confusing. So you're multiplying by the reciprocal, which is 2. Right? If I multiply by a half, I'm just going to get 1/4 here. That doesn't help. I need to either divide by a half or multiply by 2, which is the reciprocal of a half. So if you have a fraction here, multiply by the reciprocal, which just means flipping the fraction. So the reciprocal of, I keep forgetting that I don't have my pen on, the reciprocal of 1/2 is 2/1. I'm just flipping it. 2/1 is just 2. So I'm multiplying by 2. So we're going to multiply both sides by 2. So at this point, I'm going to write what we have so far because it's kind of hard to keep it in your head. So at this point, we have x plus 5 squared equals 42.5. So at this point, we have the squared thing by itself. So we can just take the square root of both sides. So that's our next step. So we would take the square root of both sides. We'd get whatever the square root of 42.5 is. So we'll have plus or minus x plus 5 equals plus or minus the square root of 42.5. So hopefully we can see what we would need to do next. You don't actually need to figure out what the square root of 42.5 is because we're not actually solving this. We're just looking at what the steps would be. So the next thing we would do is just to subtract 5 from both sides. Remember that if you're actually solving this, you need to split it into the two cases, the positive case and the negative case first, and then subtract 5 from both sides. And that would be the solution. So, and then it just goes on like that. I'm not going to do any more examples here. Hopefully this was helpful. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will see you in the next video.